she's queen and she's like selling feed pics for information. Hello beautiful people and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the differences between House of the Dragon, the HBO show, and the book Fire and Blood, because I've been reading Fire and Blood in tandem with watching the show, and there are some pretty interesting differences, so I thought I wanted to share them. So basically the book Fire and Blood is written kind of like it's gossip, right? A lot of it is written sort of as hearsay. All of the information is coming from like septons and maesters and some of like the songwriters and fools, and some of like, oh, this person said this, but this person thinks this is what happened actually. And so what I found very interesting is that the show will either combine some of their favorite like hearsay tales that are in the book, or they'll just pick one, or they will dramatize what was written into something completely different, if that makes sense. So, and what was funny is like they really don't give you that much dialogue in the book. The book is very like much of a bird's eye view and very much written sort of like a history book, but again, it's like hearsay, a lot of it, and it's very gossipy. That's why it's very good, and it moves very quickly, because the book starts at like Aegon the Conqueror landing, and it made me realize so many things. I didn't realize that King's Landing was called King's Landing until I read the book, and I was like, oh, he literally landed there, and that's why it's called King's Landing. A plus B equals C. Yeah, I should have figured that out earlier, but whatever. If you didn't know, now you know. You probably already knew that, because it makes a lot of sense. So, you know, he comes with his two sisters, Rhaenys and Visenya. It's a lot of years between the beginning of the book and where the HBO show House of the Dragon begins. So I had to read like 360 pages before I even get introduced to Rhaenyra. Like, I don't think Viserys was born until somewhere in the 300s. A lot of it is about Jaehaerys, who is, I guess, Viserys's uncle? Grandfather? The family tree is tripping me up right now. His father, Viserys' father, is Balon, who was Jaehaerys' second son. That's correct. And Aemond was his first son, but he already died. And then so they were like, okay, it's gonna be Balon. Then Balon dies. So then you have Rhaenys, who is, if I ever pause, please understand, I'm just trying to literally imagine the family tree in my head. Okay. I'm not a visual person, so it takes a second for my brain to sketch it. Rhaenys, now here's the interesting thing. This is the first difference that I think makes a big difference. Rhaenys is actually a Baratheon. So she should have black hair. If I'm not mistaken, I think she's the daughter of Jocelyn and Aemond. So she's supposed to have black hair because all Baratheons have black hair. And the reason that's important is because for her to be blonde, like a Targaryen, even though obviously she does have Targaryen blood in her, for her to be blonde throws a wrench in the whole, like, figuring out that Joffrey isn't a Baratheon because he's blonde plot. You know, like when Ned Stark is reading the book and he's going, oh, Baratheon, black of hair, Baratheon, black of hair. For Rhaenys to not be black of hair ruins that plot. That's the first difference I noticed. So basically the whole thing is they have this council. Jaehaerys holds this council that we see at the beginning of the show that basically decides who is going to be the successor of him. Should it be his first son's first heir, even though she's a woman? Or should it be his second son's first heir because he's a man? Now, by virtue of, like, the first son, it should be Rhaenys, but in the virtue of it needs to be a king, not a queen, it would be Viserys. Now, this is what's, like, really important in the book that I don't think the show, like, really, especially if you haven't read the book, I think the show doesn't hammer it home in the way that the book does, which is this council was, like, all of the lords and important people in the realm come to vote on this. And like 70% of them, if not even more than that, were like, no, fuck Rhaenys. It needs to be a man, obviously. And almost everybody voted for Viserys. So then for Viserys to forget that happened and create a situation that puts his daughter in that situation of danger, basically. Like, he's ignoring what the realm wants when he keeps Rhaenyra as heir, but, you know, obviously, like, he sees a lot of Emma in Rhaenyra, and he feels guilty for killing Emma, trying to get a male heir. So I understand why he tried to stick with that, but he kind of fucked her over because the realm wasn't gonna want that. It was never gonna work. You were trying to make fetch happen. It was never gonna happen. And the reason that you were a king is the same reason why it was never gonna happen. It's also not like he lived that long. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't act like, oh, the times have changed. You died at like 50 something, sir. Jaehaerys died at like 100. Okay, whereas Viserys got really out of shape and really sick in his 50s. So it's not like it's been a lot of time. There's still people alive who voted. So, like, he just set her up for failure. He kind of set his family up for failure, which is why, like, that scene where he's at the dinner table with them and he's looking around, you know, yes, it can be interpreted as him looking at his family and being like, oh, look at all of my kin finally getting along. But I think it's more of like oh shit, what have I done now that my family hates each other and I'm about to leave, and my family's worst enemies are each other. And, like, literally, what have I done? I've set everybody up for failure. That's what I think it might have been more of. Okay, another important thing that this just reminded me of. So, Alicent Hightower was actually taking care of Jaehaerys at the end of Jaehaerys' life. That's the old king. That's the first king we see on TV. He's got this big beard. He's in the chair at the council when he appoints Viserys to be his heir. So in the show, you see Viserys dying, and you see older Alicent interpreting his last words as being about her son. I mean, if you're paying attention, I don't know that everybody would have gotten this, but I think the implication was that whatever he was saying, he thought that he was saying it to Rhaenyra, because he was earlier having a conversation with Rhaenyra when Rhaenyra came in, and I think he mistaked her for Alicent at first. But then when Alicent came in, he thought she was Rhaenyra. He has one eye and he's like super delirious. He didn't take milk of the poppy that day, right? And he's dying and he's delusional. So he's saying to Alicent what he wants to say to Rhaenyra. And he's talking about the Song of Ice and Fire, and we need somebody to unite the realm. And Alicent thinks that that's her son. In the book, Alicent is taking care of Jaehaerys. And in the book, it mentions that a lot of times Jaehaerys thought that Alicent was one of his daughters. Do you see what I'm saying? So they kind of took what happened with Alicent and Jaehaerys in the book and put it for Viserys and Alicent at the end. But I think it worked, though. Like, I think the implication was clear. The other thing is, though, in the book, Alicent and Rhaenyra not only aren't, like, friends, but they're also not even the same age. Like, Alicent is very much more of a mom to her. Like, Rhaenyra was happy to call her stepmom. That's what it says. I think they're maybe, like, 8 or 10 years apart or something. And something funny that it says is that, like, Alicent maintained her, like, slender figure after all her children, whereas Rhaenyra started to grow stump and stout, and she resented Alicent for having such a nice figure. Whereas in the show, you don't see, like, body resentment, and they are the same age. Like, they seem like best friends to potentially, like, are they lovers? Like, and I remember watching an interview with the younger versions of Alicent and Rhaenyra, and they were saying that when they were playing it, if it seems like they're a little bit homoerotic and if it seems like they're a little bit in love with each other, it's because they made that choice to act that way, and they felt like that was appropriate for the characters to be girls who were not just best friends but, like, kind of in love. And I think that they did a really good job with that, because that added a whole new dimension to when Alicent finds out that Rhaenyra's slept with 2 people without telling her. She feels betrayed, not just because she lied and she's her best friend, but also because they're a little bit in love. And people were also saying that they'd been performing like sort of fragments of marriage rituals under all the different gods in many different parts of the show, which I think is very funny. So the show definitely has more love between Alicent and Rhaenyra than ever was in the book. Like, in the book, they were never that close. Like, Rhaenyra didn't mind that she was her stepmom for a little bit until she did. But the other thing that I found was like a really big difference from the book is pretty much everything to do with Sir Criston Cole. Almost none of it happens like that. Sir Criston Cole, yes, he does sort of have like a little bit of tension with Rhaenyra, right? But all of the intimacy stuff with them, there's two different accounts and they're both wildly different. One of them is from Mushroom, who's like their singer slash like fool kind of person. And the other one is from, I think it's a Septon, I forget which one. But both of them are strange and very different. And then in the show, they just kind of like combine them both to a point that was like a little bit excessive and makes Rhaenyra look excessively guilty, for sure. Because I remember the two different stories were that, okay, so definitely Rhaenyra was seen out and about a little bit with Daemon, right? And so one of the stories was like, she was practicing with him, but actually to do it with Sir Criston Cole. But then when she came back, he refused. That's story one. The other story is that, you know, she did mess around with Daemon, right? But neither of the stories were that she actually did end up sleeping with Criston Cole. If I recall correctly, it was like she tried and he was like, no. So I don't think in either of the stories she actually hooked up with Criston Cole. However, in one person's story, she did, like, the whole moment where he's like, let's run away together, let's get married. One of the accounts did say that that happened. The other one did not. Criston Cole in the show, like, brutally kills two people, like, very unnecessarily, right? First one is Joffrey, who is Laenor Valerian's, like, boyfriend. In the show, he just, like, brutally is like, you're gay? Bye. Literally die. But in the book, he just dies in attorney. Like, it's nothing that hate crimey, which I found, but I can't say I didn't find that moment to be like crazy riveting, but it was also like almost unnecessarily savage. Like, it was like, whoa, Criston Cole is like very I don't understand how he still has a head. You know what I'm saying? But I guess in the show, they kind of made it seem more like there was this transition, this big transition of loyalty. And like, there was, but it wasn't so dramatic. In the book, it's like you don't really hear about all the in-between where Alicent comes to him before he's going to kill himself. And he wasn't that guilty because he didn't just like randomly hate crime someone either. And he didn't lose his virtue in the book. He didn't sleep with Rhaenyra at all. She tried, and he was like, no, you're little, or I'm supposed to protect you. He was like very off it, which is why in the show it kind of looked like he was off it, but then he ended up doing it anyway, and then he felt really badly about it, and then it looks like Alicent became like his savior, so to speak. Alicent and her schemes, the whole situation with Clubfoot, Larys Clubfoot, it's a rumor that he might have been the one that killed his brother and his dad at Harrenhal, but it's also like nobody actually knows. In the book, it was like it could have been him, it could have been the king who wanted any evidence of Rhaenyra's potential bastards to be gone, and it more likely was Daemon being jealous. That's what it said in the book. So the whole, like, none of the Larys Alicent stuff really happens in the book, but I think the TV show did a really good job with that. And I don't mind them adding stuff. You know, I don't mind, like, the foot thing, the foot fetish, no matter how disgusting it was to see, and the fact that I had to run it back to realize that she, like, knew he was doing that and she wasn't looking on purpose, that was, like, an added, layer of grossness that I think served really well for the story. And like Larys being like obviously secretly like in love with her, but also misusing her and abusing her, and it's gross, but I do think it serves the plot. And I think it definitely reinforces Alicent's character and like the tragicness of it and how pitiful she is, in the sense of she's queen and she's like selling feed pics for information. It's really sad. And she's only ever been in service to the men in her life, whether it's her father, her husband, her son. Also, in the book, there's a younger green sibling called Daeron. We don't see him at all in the show. Am I wrong? That's why, well, okay, I always thought that Aemond feels like a middle child. And I can't lie to you, I think he might be my favorite character, especially to watch on screen. Yeah, when I'm thinking about it, he's my favorite character to watch on screen. It used to be like Daemon obviously is a really fun, interesting character, but I think that whenever I see Aemond on the screen, I'm really excited because he's such a presence. He reminds me of literally Severus Snape, because whenever he's on screen, you're like, first of all, the presence is just like oozing, captivating, like he's taking over, he's killing everyone in presence. Like your eye goes right to him, and it's not just because he has an eye patch. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's just like oozing like this certain kind of like swagger. I kind of hate that word, but you know what I'm saying, right? And so I always felt he was middle childish, because he was like so bold and like low-key attention seeking, but also like very mature in a weird way. Like when he was like, you know, I lost an eye, but I gained a dragon. Like going out and taking Vhagar in the middle of the night. That's some bold, like low-key middle child shit. Do you know what I'm saying? But I mean, I guess actually in the book he is a middle child. In the show he's not. He's the youngest, because there's no Daeron, to my knowledge, unless, is he just too young that I don't really see him in the TV show? Like maybe he's just like in the nursery when everybody else is like fighting. I don't know. Somebody comment down below. Did we see a Daeron? I don't think so, because the order is actually Aegon, Helaena, Vaemond, and then Daeron. I don't recall seeing a Daeron, but I found that to be interesting. The whole eye stuff happens, but the two girls are not there in the book. It's just boys on boys. They're also like 5. Like they're like the one who stabbed him in the eye was 5, and I'm like, how are we? And Aemond was 10, so I'm like, you can't fight off a 5-year-old, buddy. I mean, I guess he was alone. That's true. He was alone, but he's fighting off like literal toddlers. Like a toddler stabbed him in the eye. BFFR. The stuff that happens in the book, it's like when he went to go get the dragon, I think the youngest son of Rhaenyra, Joffrey, was like, you leave her alone. What? You're 3 years old, you understand what's happening here? Everybody in the book is honestly so young. And I remember when I started reading Game of Thrones, like the first book, I haven't finished it yet. I stopped reading it to read this. But like, Daenerys starts off being like, I don't know, 12 or something. Like all the Starks are like 3 years younger than they are in the show. And it's just like, these kids are babies. How do they have knives? I just think it's kind of funny. But yeah, I think that's most of the differences that I noticed, at least that I can remember right now, between the book and the show. If you have any that I forgot, please put them down below. I would love to read that. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, give this a good rating, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.